What does your crazy neighbor do to be labeled the crazy neighbor? Hey friends, could you do me a favor and take 2 seconds to like this video by giving it a big thumbs up. Also, consider clicking the red subscribe button below if you'd like to see more videos. Thanks. Had severe anger issues and yelled at anything or anyone he didn't like on the street. A few years ago, he had a road rage incident, and when he started banging on the other car's windows, the occupants got out and beat him badly. During this, he had a heart attack and now barely has enough mobility to walk to the mailbox and back. Also, he doesn't yell anymore. If you are not ready for face punches, you are not ready to punch faces. My sister's neighbor reported my sister to the police because her kids were playing in my sister's garden. Not for the usual reasons, too much noise, etc. Nope, because a volcano in Italy had erupted and the radiation would hurt them. My sister lives in the UK. LMAO. I would have loved to see the police's face when they heard the reason. Likely the, for fuck's sake not another one of these, look. He jumped in front of my car while I was driving down the road to yell at me for going through his trash at night. Told him it was probably raccoons. He refuses to believe it to this day. Edit. I can't believe this comment blew up. It's crazy to think about. Thank you all for the awards. A lot of you are asking if I did it. I didn't. How do we know you aren't a raccoon? A quick look at your name tells me you got it from the trash. How do you explain that? He ain't one of ours. I can tell you that. Edit. Thank you so much guys. You all have made my year. She has a penchant for going around sticking nails in people's tires at night. This has happened dozens of times to nearly everyone on the street, though she's slowed down since more people started installing video cams and motion sensor lights in their driveways. Years ago, we had a guy in our neighborhood like this. He stopped hitting our house when my crazy ass mother came flying out the house around 3 AM with her baseball bat, fighting fire with fire. And by fire, I mean crazy. And by fire, I also mean crazy. Pulled us over, pretending to be a police officer, saying that we had somehow broken the law whilst pulling out of our driveway, and that she was going to call it in. She isn't a cop. LOL. Edit. I considered using my dashcam video to actually call it in, but we had just moved in, and I wasn't sure if she was the type of crazy to burn the house down or poison my dog. After chatting with the other neighbors, it turns out she's just the wannabe HOA president in a neighborhood with no HOA, so mostly harmless, just very annoying. Pretty sure that's a crime. Not only a crime, but a crime that really pisses off police officers. They'll arrest people on the spot for this kind of shit. My neighbor sits in his yard, hides behind his plants, and meows at people who pass by. He is not dangerous at all, but he is not right in the head either. His caretakers are his parents, and they seem to be very nice people. His dad once told me he just likes to be a cat, and left it at that. I didn't ask any more questions. I would also like to be a cat, so I see no issue with this. It's all fun and games until he poops in the sandbox. Took my parents to court because he lost in our HOA chairman election. Some people just have too much free time. Edit. He actually demanded we pay his legal fees after he lost in court. Twice. I'm the HOA president. I get elected over and over again because I just focus on things like making sure the buildings are safe and maintained, and that the grounds are reasonably cared for, or the pool is working. I had some guy come in and was all gung-ho about fixing all the things that were wrong. So I said, here, take the job. I don't have a lot of free time anyway. So he takes his year term and basically runs it like the stereotype. Everyone is annoyed. I'm still in the board, so I stop the things I can, but we have a couple other obnoxious busybodies on the board, so I orchestrate a coup. I basically make sure the busybodies on his side don't get re-elected to the board, and then get myself voted back in. He sued me. I think his attorney thought I would just back down. I keep an attorney on retainer because of various reasons. My attorney got the whole thing thrown out in such a way I could sue to costs, so I did. I then went back to running things the way I always did, except I fined him for every little thing I could for like a year. That was super petty, but he sued me. The old lady who lived below me left me multiple cryptic letters, blaming me for the birds chirping too loudly in the mornings. Not pet birds, the sparrows and shit, outside. This went on for months. Edit. I'm flattered by the upvotes and awards. Thank you. To answer the most commonly asked question, yes, for a brief period I had a bird feeder. I took it down after a few months, after multiple cryptic letters. Eventually management got involved and took her side. Even though bird feeders were explicitly allowed per the lease, there were several trees nearby, including one that literally hung onto both her and my balconies. I assure you that birds existed before I set up the feeder, as they continued to exist after. My sister and brother-in-law took over the lease 4 years ago, and they still get the occasional note from Bird Lady. Apartment management has even inspected their unit to verify there's no bird feeder or any other bird luring devices. Edit 2. I found one of the notes. Again, your bird doo-doo is on my railings, bird seeds on my porch and chairs, and your birds are ruining my night rest. Wee hours of the morning, birds in your feeder chirping. Bird feeder was gone at this point. I used to work nights at a hotel, and those were always my favorite calls to get. Yes, hello, the crickets outside are really loud, and we can't sleep. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'll just go have a word with them and see what we can do. This happened disturbingly often. I'm still not sure what they actually expected me to do about this at 1 AM. Called the police on people. Parked perfectly legal in front of their house. Took pictures of my partner's dad just working in the yard. Disappeared suddenly without a trace. And then suddenly come back home in the dead of night. 8 months later. Weirdos. That sounds a lot like jail. Quite possibly for stalking. Yep. Our neighbor would disappear for long periods of time. Cops showed up a lot. I could hear his wife complain that he'd get blackout drunk, and his parole officer was unhelpful. His truck was eventually left in the complex lot, with front end damage. He was in jail 3 times in 10 months. The last was obviously for a DUI. He eats my flowers. In his defense, he told us that he has been doing it for years. When he introduced himself, after we bought the house, he also brought over frozen cookies in a plastic bag as a housewarming gift, but wasn't sure what was in them. We share a side yard, and he is a really great neighbor. Just an older, quiet guy who keeps to himself and eats my flowers. Comes over to my yard and eats the lilies raw, or brings scissors and clips the heads too. Boil and make jam. I thought that his particular foraging was interesting and quirky, so I planted a couple raspberry, blackberry, and blueberry bushes 3 years ago, when we first moved in, on the side yard we share. I told him to help himself to berries anytime, especially before the birds do. The bushes have all gone insane, and the entire side of my house is now a summer berry haven for us to share. Having a decent relationship with the guy I share a property line with is worth some dead-headed flowers. Your neighbor might be part goat. My neighbor was an 85-year-old widow that lived alone. She had 2 vehicles, a car and truck, and over the course of a few months, I realized that she was no longer parking her car in her garage, like she had for the many years prior to that. Then suddenly, the truck wasn't being parked inside the garage either. Turns out, she no longer had room in her garage to park her vehicles, because she was walking down to a residential construction site, about a block away every evening, and she'd grab 2x4s, and bring them home. She had over 500 boards stacked in her garage, and when she was questioned on what she was going to do with it, she didn't have an answer. Edit. Bonus crazy neighbor stories. I drove 16 hours straight, pulled in my drive, and crashed on my couch immediately. Must have left the garage door open, because I woke up to the neighbor lady shaking me to see if they missed my newspaper delivery that morning also. Neighbor lady thought I didn't clean up after my dog in her front yard. I had never owned a dog, so she retaliated by walking around the neighborhood with a garbage bag, picking up every bit of dog poo she could find, and dumped said bag of dog poo on my front lawn while I was standing in the front window watching. Ran up over $300 on 1 month's water bill of mine. because neighbor lady was hooking her sprinkler up to my water when I'd leave for work in the morning and would let it run all day until right before I got home from work. She would put up an ugly orange snow fence between our yards in the fall to keep my leaves out of her yard. Me pointing out that I only had pine trees did not dissuade her from the decision to leave the snow fence up. Edit 2. Day 1. I should have known something was fishy with this lady. Literally, day 1. I closed on my house at 9 AM and had a roofing company at the house, waiting for the call that I closed. We spent the day ripping off the old layers and getting bundles up on the roof for the next day. It was hot out, we were exhausted, and all sitting in the front yard cooling off, when neighbor lady walked out of her house, down the sidewalk to my house, and, without even acknowledging the 6 of us staring at her, she walked in the front door and had herself a look-see. She hated dandelions. I found this out the first year that I lived there, when I noticed that my lawn was dying off in an extremely weird way, almost as if someone was spraying weed killer on the stream setting, trying to snipe dandelions from 20 feet away. That's literally what she was doing. Being the nice guy I am, I would clean her driveway off in the winter because I had a snowblower. She would never thank me in person, but instead, she'd come over to my house after I had finished and would leave a bag on my front door that usually contained whatever expired goods she had in her pantry. Some of the standouts for me was like a dozen cans of 10-year expired Chef Boyardee stuff, and once a half a bag of wheat flour. Had a neighbor who wouldn't let anyone use his driveway because he didn't want it to get dirty. Anyone, including himself. He parked on the street outside. If he thought you were having a party, he would drag a bunch of plastic bags, full of God knows what, to the end of his driveway, so no one could turn around it. One time, I came home, and he was outside hosing it down, in the rain. To his credit, I've never seen a cleaner driveway. I have a neighbor who I have seen watering his grass, during rainstorms, on multiple occasions. Next door lady standing on her driveway, yelling at me, because acorns have fallen from a large oak tree, on my property onto said driveway, demanding that I cause the tree to cease and desist from this intentional criminal activity. Fun fact from a law student: trees do not in fact have the legal capacity required for intent. Thank God you're a law student. I was stumped. She dug up my fancy flowers and replanted them in her own yard, 15 feet away. We bought a house, and on the day while we were unloading the first truckload, the neighbor came into our garage, uninvited, and started telling us what trees on our property he wanted us to cut down. Not the craziest, but the effing audacity of some people. You should have planted even more trees. Every day is Arbor Day, bitch. I used to live in a HOA. One of the members on the board lived across the street from my neighbor and I. He sent a letter to us, saying that we all have to mow the lawn on the same day, at the same cut height, and in the same pattern, to create uniformity in the neighborhood. My neighbor and I intentionally cut on different days, and in opposite patterns, just to annoy the guy. We used to live next to a woman that would have a disco party for her cats, in her backyard, at 2 AM. Every few days, she would put up a disco ball and party lights, with music playing. It was a little odd, but what made it crazy was her dancing like a Native American, performing a ritual around the disco ball. It's honestly one of the strangest things I've ever witnessed. Does she send out invites or something? How do I get on that list? I've heard way more than I need to about their health ailments and bowel movements. One night, I'm in the backyard sitting in lawn chairs, watching the stars with the wife, when she pops out with a flashlight in our faces. I went off. What the effing hell are you doing? She apologized, and left with no explanation. I could go on, but then I may start thinking about moving again. I'm sorry, but what the F?